In the last few days, Mark Carney just made two of the most consequential energy policy decisions in Canadian history simultaneously. He stood in Calgary alongside Alberta Premier Danielle Smith and signed an implementation plan advancing the conditions required to build such a huge project that will choke US oil dominance and will put Canada in front. Let's start with Move 1, which is the Alberta Carbon Deal and West Coast Pipeline path.
CTV's Ottawa Bureau Chief Graham Richardson takes us through the steps that got us to this stage. Graham.
Sandy, Mark Carney's political brand is all about changing the way Liberals operate in government when it comes to the economy. Getting a deal with Alberta to move more crude to Tidewater will likely be Exhibit 1 of that for years to come. After years of opposition and protests, pipeline politics are changing. What seemed entirely unlikely just 18 months ago is now one major step closer.
Are you willing to allow a new pipeline?
The Prime Minister not confirming it, but sources telling CTV News his government and Alberta are set to announce a deal on a new pipeline to the West Coast.
Prime Minister Mark Carney and Alberta Premier Danielle Smith said they're eyeing a fall 2027 start date for construction of a new bitumen pipeline to the West Coast, part of a plan to accomplish the remaining steps of the landmark energy deal they signed last fall. The agreement includes a commitment from Carney to declare the pipeline as being in the national interest by October of this year. Alberta's effective industrial carbon emission price is to rise to $130 per ton by 2040, and its headline price would rise to $140 per ton, also by 2040 from the current $95 per ton. The pipeline, if approved and constructed, is designed to carry up to 1 million barrels per day of Alberta bitumen to the British Columbia coast, where it would be loaded onto tankers bound for Asian buyers paying Brent-linked global market prices. Trans Mountain currently runs near capacity at approximately 590,000 barrels per day. A new 1 million barrel per day pipeline would more than double Canada's Pacific export capacity, giving Alberta producers a second major non-American market at scale. The WCS-WTI discount, which averaged $17 per barrel over 2 decades and reached $46 in 2018, would face further compression as producers gain additional pricing leverage from expanded Asian market access. Smith told reporters, "We're much closer to attaining our joint ambition to make Canada into a global energy leader and a trusted supplier of responsibly produced lower emissions energy in the world. We've accomplished a lot together in less than 6 months." The pipeline is linked to the Pathways Alliance carbon capture project, a 400-kilometer CO2 transport and storage system funded by Canada's major oil sands producers that would reduce oil sands emissions by 22 megatons per year. Carney stated explicitly, no pathways, no pipeline. The MOU also contemplates modifying the Oil Tanker Moratorium Act on British Columbia's northern coast to allow tanker traffic for an approved pipeline project, a significant policy shift that opens the northern BC route as a viable corridor. Now, turn to Move 2, which is doubling the electricity grid.
Power-hungry homes and businesses are driving demand for electricity across the country. Keeping up with that appetite is a practical and economic necessity. The Prime Minister says growing the grid is critical. Mark Carney wants to double capacity, and he's launched a new initiative to get it done.
Electricity demand in Canada is expected to double by 2050. So we will double our grid. That's the headline. Canada will double its electricity generation over the course of the next 2 decades. Because the path to affordability is electrification. The path to competitiveness is electrification. The path to net zero is electrification. Electrification underpins everything.
On May 14th, Carney unveiled Canada's National Electricity Strategy, a plan to double the country's grid capacity by 2050 at a projected total construction cost exceeding $1 trillion. The strategy targets lowering energy costs for 70% of Canadian households creating 130,000 new electricity sector jobs, 30,000 by the end of 2028 and 100,000 more by 2050, and positioning Canada as a clean energy exporter to allied nations facing their own power capacity shortfalls. The strategy explicitly provides additional flexibility for natural gas generation under Canada's clean electricity regulations, an acknowledgement that provinces with different starting points in their electricity systems require different transition pathways. Carney described the measure as a very practical approach, noting that Canada has some of the cheapest natural gas in the world, and that gas will help deliver household affordability during the grid expansion period. The strategy covers hydroelectricity, nuclear power, wind, solar, battery storage, and cross-country transmission connections between provinces. Now, turn to Move 3, which is the LNG Canada record and Asian market penetration. LNG Canada exported 1 million metric tons of natural gas to Asia in April 2026, a monthly record for the facility. More than half went to South Korea. A tanker discharged Canadian LNG at a Chinese terminal in late April, completing a roughly 3-week voyage from Kitimat, British Columbia, and marking the first direct Canadian LNG delivery to China's market. China has not imported a single cargo of American LNG since Washington imposed sanctions, making Canada the beneficiary of a market the United States locked itself out of. LNG Canada can export up to 14 million metric tons annually. Cedar LNG is under construction nearby. 7 additional LNG projects are in various stages of development along the BC coast. Now, turn to Move 4, which is the Bridger Pipeline and U.S. refinery leverage. On April 30th, Trump signed the presidential permit for the Bridger Pipeline expansion, authorizing 550,000 barrels per day of Canadian crude to flow from Montana into Wyoming's refinery system. The permit is commercially significant for Canadian producers, but its strategic significance runs in both directions. American Gulf Coast refineries, built at a cost of hundreds of billions of dollars, specifically to process heavy sour crude the grade Alberta produces, cannot easily source alternative supply. They were built for Canadian and Venezuelan heavy crude. Venezuelan supply is sanctions constrained. Every westbound pipeline barrel Canada builds increases its leverage to price the southbound barrels at competitive global rates. Rather than the discounted WCS-WTI spread, American refineries historically extracted from producers with no alternatives. Now, turn to Move 5, which is the $6 billion trade diversification infrastructure launch. On March 4th, Transport Minister Stephen McKinnon opened the calls for proposals for both the $5 billion Trade Diversification Corridors Fund and the $1 billion Arctic Infrastructure Fund. The stated primary objective of the larger fund is explicit: strengthen trade, enabling transportation infrastructure, and help double non-US exports. The Arctic Infrastructure Fund targets dual-use northern transportation infrastructure, serving both defense readiness and civilian economic development across the Yukon, Northwest Territories, Nunavut, and northern Quebec and Labrador. On March 3rd, the day before the federal program launches, the Arctic Gateway Group signed a partnership agreement with the Port of Antwerp-Bruges, creating a formal North Atlantic trade corridor framework between Canada's only deepwater Arctic port and the second largest port in the European Union. Taken together, these 5 moves describe a systematic restructuring of Canadian energy export architecture. A new West Coast pipeline adds 1 million barrels per day of Pacific capacity. A doubled electricity grid creates clean energy export potential. LNG, Canada's record Asian deliveries, are locked in structural supply relationships. The Bridger Pipeline adds southbound capacity while expanding the leverage base. And $6 billion in trade diversification infrastructure is building the northern and Arctic corridors that connect Canadian resources directly to European and Asian buyers. Carney said the agreement with Smith was about trust and cooperative federalism, coming together, making an agreement, moving forward, creating a better future for our kids and grandkids, including with respect to the environment. Because this is climate action alongside providing energy security.